you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Christopher Yu. I'm the founding director of the Center for Technology Innovation and Competition, and you are at the Information Center for the session for one of the things that I love dearly about this school and a program I believe in very deeply, which is Ryland and Jess and Shashank have heard me say this more and more, but I am committed to building the best law and technology program. I used to say on the East Coast, but they told me I'm being too humble. It's sort of in the country, if not the world. And the interesting thing is you see a lot of programs that have research and faculty events, but no connection to students. You see a lot of them that have, and even in this school, there's great student programs with very little connection to a whole community of faculty and research going on. And my conviction has always been that you can only have a great center if you have both. There has to be a rich set of interconnections between the students can't just go to a program with a great, law and business program. They have to have access to it, and so forth. And to me, the journal is the key institution that brings together those two sides. And it's something that we started a bunch of years ago. And anytime you start something new, you can have great hopes. And I'll tell you right now, it's exceeded our wildest expectations, both in terms of the substance, but more importantly, that the way it has grown into being a central part of the experience for students who are interested in law and technology. It's a place where they come together. And part of it's the interaction with the faculty, part of it's the interaction with the substance, but part of it's the interaction with each other. And that's something that we think is just, as a faculty member, you can hope for that, but you can never really know for sure. And in fact, it has become that to a degree that I never really had hoped, anticipated. And so it's just, I'm so delighted to have you here. Before I go any further, I need to say one caveat, and I should make two announcements. One caveat, this is being recorded for the benefit of students who could not attend, who had a conflict. So just always, I also teach privacy. As a matter of awareness, you should be aware of that as well. And the second thing is we do have a couple other events coming up, just so you know. We're sponsoring the journal itself. Our conference is Friday. And I'll tell you exactly the subject matter about it. I normally would worry about bumping into classes, but I know that the Wendels don't have class on Friday this year. So, the good news is you're free to come. We'd love to have you for any part of it. And on Saturday the 11th of February, a week from Saturday, the Asian Pacific American Law Students Association and the Asian Law Review are having their annual conference, and this year it's on cybersecurity. And so for those, it's always, among my other hats, I am the faculty advisor for Apulsa. But beyond, so I'd be saying you should come. But this is actually a topic that's disproportionately interesting to people who tend to come to this event. So if you're interested, they're going to have a great program of professionals coming in from about 10 o'clock through the afternoon and on Saturday the 11th. So I encourage you to come to that as well. All right? But that's all prelims. Let's talk about the journal. The journal is a really unique journal, unlike anything else at Penn and at the law school. And it's sort of important for you to understand why. You'll see we are not part of the journal competition. We're not part of the normal rotation. It is taught, and this is a part of the engagement between student and faculty, as a two-part experience. One is a seminar, a faculty-led seminar on a different topic. And I wish it always, at this stage in January, we don't know exactly which faculty member will be teaching it, and the faculty member will determine the topic. But so I wish I could tell you, and you sign up, last year we did this. I did not, I suspected that it would be me and we'd be teaching what we're doing this year, which is space and satellite law. But I can't tell you that what it'd be for next year. But in general, and you can talk to the students who've been through that experience, mostly in this case, it'll be something that they'll probably find engaging with, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. I'll show you the 6 years we've done this, all the topics we've done. So in the fall, we do a seminar that meets in the usual way for a couple hours, and we do readings along the topic of what that year's subject for that year's symposium is. Obviously, Friday is February 3rd, somewhere early in the spring semester. We will also convene and have a traditional academic conference. We have 5 papers this year. We have commentators speaking on those papers, and the students take the lead in organizing the whole thing. So they've been in touch with the faculty helps is the person that reaches out and use our relationships to get the authors, because that's really does it. But beyond that, the organization, the contact with the authors, logistics, all of that is run by the students. And then in the spring, you edit those. You have the classic journal experience, where you serve as an editor for those papers in the conference issue, and have the feedback, the process, the blue booking, God help us, and all the other things that go along with being that journal a member of a journal board. And then then we publish the issue in the summer. And the fall, as the seminar should be, it is a graded seminar, 3-credit experience in the spring. It is a pass-fail, graded, ungraded, because it's kind of hard to grade. It doesn't really make sense to do that, and traditionally journals don't do that. So it's a really interesting aspect, and again, like we said, it's going to be a great opportunity to collaborate with CTIC faculty. We do overlay on top of this a series of social events, including traditionally a happy hour where the CTIC faculty come. We support team building events done by the staff, and we have a series of things that really allows us all to come together. You just had your training for the spring on Friday, which was in this room. Literally in this room. And, it was an exercise, and then actually the typical stuff and all that stuff afterwards, and it was actually a nice event. And the other thing that I would say is, because it's not a typical journal, it is not uncommon for students to be part of this journal and another journal as well. So it's not, unlike the journal competition where you go through it and you're put in one journal, it is actually separate from that. And so, and this is, the thing you primarily worry about is workload, which is if you are a member of 2 journals, it'd be very hard. Because this is a class, it essentially lowers your workload in proportion, and it actually makes that very manageable. And it's actually kind of a nice thing. It's interesting because I know that other schools do allow students to be members of more than one journal. I've never quite gotten into the history of why we don't do it here, but this is an opportunity. For example, it is not unusual for so Richard Hughes, who's one of the conference organizers this year, is also a member of the Journal of Constitutional Law. And the editor-in-chief last year was a member of the Law Review. So it just happens where you can actually do one of those things. And I like the way that's structured, because if this person's interested in law and technology but also wants one of the other journal experiences, it's actually not necessarily, it's not preclusive if you're doing both. And then lastly, and I said about the credits. And so that's the way that the experience is basically structured. And the nice thing about it, I remember when we went to the administration and asked to do something very non-traditional, they were enthusiastically in support. And the reason is because something that gets students and faculty closer together in a classroom, the kind of intensive environment where you're talking about a conversation about cutting-edge stuff, not where it's like contracts where they're importing you knowledge where there's right answers and wrong answers. In the seminar, we talked about emerging issues for which we really don't know how they're going to work out. And I think that that's a fundamentally different experience, but frankly, that's where most of us practice law. I mean, the assignments where there's answers are very short, and it's actually the stuff that you do that is really trying to figure out how to advise clients, and then actually how to actually make law in a more open, textured environment is a very different sort of experience. If you want to know what has been done in the past, these are the 6 topics that have been done in the past in reverse chronological order. As I mentioned this year, one of the things the topic this year is space law. A regime that was really built around governments. This is like, NASA and Sputnik has shifted to an entirely commercial environment. And what we see is 2 things. One is that the institutions made to govern it are not actually fit for purpose, and they're showing some creak around the corners. But another part of it is the regime was not made for the intensity of resource usage that is happening with modern privatization of satellites. So, as you probably know, SpaceX, headed by Elon Musk, proud Penn alumnus, is throwing hundreds of satellites in the sky at a rate that's unprecedented. And so, figuring out how we're going to regulate that, problems of space debris, problem with interference with, they have to beam signals down to the ground, with spectrum, with existing uses on the ground, has been incredible. And there's a legacy satellite industry that we have this big fight in because they're actually rivals in this space. The previous year, it was on law enforcement and innovation, which made, as you probably know, with the use of AI and all these other things, this is a big question about AI discrimination and the like. The previous year before that was about COVID. It's picking up in the Times. Professor Wagner taught a wonderful journal seminar about different aspects of it, from patent issues, health-related issues, food and drug issues, and the like to figure out how this all works out. Before that, I actually taught the role of the state in innovation policy. And just so you know what that is, to me, it's everything but patents. It's funny, we always think about innovation with patents. It turns out through tax policy, subsidies, a whole bunch of other things that are starting to get written about, it's not really that well studied. And so it was actually a great experience for me. We looked at a bunch of general stuff, and then we looked at financial services, internet, a bunch of specific domains. And it was really interesting because to me it was important material that's actually not taught in any other class in the school. And so I find myself wondering how to retool what we're doing to make that go. Before that, Professors Hoffman and Wilkins and Ryan taught a wonderful version on smart contracts. And the first one was looking at the copyright patent intersection, which is always something that's at issue. We'll have to wait and see what next year is. But if this gives you a flavor, this is the kinds of things that you'll see. And it would be consistent, because it'll be one of the CTIC faculty that'll follow the research interests of those faculty. Right? So the process, again, as I said, is not part of the normal journal competition, which happens at the end of your first year exam. Our tradition is to release a competition, the writing competition, in March. And it will be released sometime shortly before spring break, and will end a full week after spring break. So if you are one of those people who has at a loose end for spring break and want to use that time to do it, is intended to make that possible. On the other hand, if you have full plans for spring break and don't want to consume it with that, we're intended to give you enough time before and after so you can do it without interfering with those plans. And we will commit to getting you an answer before the journal competition begins. So there are two kinds of students. There's a student who wants to do both. Admit me, don't admit me, fine. I'm going to do the journal competition, and you'll do 2 journals. That's great. There are other students who would only want to do 1 journal. And if they knew they were going to be on JLI, they would not actually do the journal competition. And if you're one of those people, we will get you your answer in advance of the journal competition to make sure that you know, so you can decide. We actually have a number of criteria. The basic thing we're going to do is we will give you a law review article. I mean, this is a perfect editing experience. And you're supposed to critique it. And give your reactions to the argument, both on the substantive level and the writing level. Give your input on what you think of the article. In addition, we will evaluate grades, extracurriculars related to the space. And we do ask that every student either have taken or be planning to take 1 class taught by a CTIC faculty member during the course. And frankly, I can't imagine anyone who'd want to be on the journal who wouldn't take it. For most of them, it's not a question of a course, it's a question of how many. So I mean, it's sort of a funny little thing that comes down there. And so that's, and all that. And I will say that, to make sure to avoid a problem before, it used to say, these are the sort of the requirements. As the journal has become as more students have applied for it, it then became, who was the most involved and thereby, in my mind, signaling the most interest in tech stuff. Someone had taken a class and met the minimum requirements and was quite disappointed not to make it, and was told by a senior staff person, one of the outgoing 3Ls, oh, don't worry. As it turns out, that year, this current year was actually much more competitive than it's ever been, because there was a higher level of student interest. And so what I would say is, if just put your best foot forward, and if you're involved in all the things, I think that generally the staff is about 20-ish, and there's a bunch, and then the current 2Ls, a given number of them. We have how many on the board this year?
Of 3Ls?
Yeah.
14.
14, of whom 8 are actually on the board and 6 are executive editors, so 14 on the board.
Yep.
So the current 2L class will shortly, and sometime in the spring, become the board for the next year, as is the case with all journals. In addition, there are people who don't want the responsibility of a board position but want to stay involved. We created a position called executive editors where they can continue to do so. They help edit the volume, and they attend, and they participate in the journal activities without having to bear the full year of responsibilities that go along with being a board member. All right? So that's the basic outline, but more important than hearing from me, we have 3 people here who can actually share with you their personal experiences. The first person I'll introduce you to is Rylan Ploger, who is the current editor-in-chief, 3L and editor-in-chief of the journal.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Professor Yu. So as Professor Yu mentioned, JLI serves as like an amazing locus for the tech law community here at Penn. Just on our board alone, we have a lot of crossover with PIPG, ITSC, and other tech-focused communities here. We also have people who founded ITSC. And so the fun thing about JLI is you bring together a lot of people who have developing and new and emerging interests that maybe aren't being currently served by the law school to the extent that they could be. And so what we do is we foster those connections, we bring you around people who share those same interests, and then we set you free, and you can go start your own things or build new organizations, whatever you're interested in doing. And so I think that's kind of an amazing thing about JLI that perhaps some other journals may not have. Because we are so new, we focus on where we can grow and where we can expand opportunities for students. So if that's something that you're interested in, this would be a great place for you. Again, as Professor you mentioned, we have wonderful connections with the CTIC faculty. A huge part of your law school experience that I think wasn't fully explained to me when I was a 1L is that part of what you're doing while you're here is building relationships with your professors. Like, that is something you should be investing in, something that you're paying attention to. And joining a journal like JLI where you have a lot of professor involvement is a great way to do that and expand your network both here at Penn and beyond. Because obviously you would be editing the volume 7, the journal upcoming, you're able to work with those authors and also work with commentators who end up attending our symposium and kind of meeting new people and developing connections that may lead you to job opportunities or clerkships with judges that you may not know about here at Penn. There's this whole world of legal scholarship and academia that you can be introduced to by meeting different people. And so that's a great opportunity through JLI as well. So we are the tech journal. It's great if you're interested in tech. This is a great place to be. But I want to emphasize that JLI is not only for people who plan on practicing tech law. So when I entered law school, I had previously worked at a startup focused on the humanitarian aid industry. And so I was planning on doing tech law. I was really excited about that. JLI was a huge part of my recruiting process. I'm not a litigator. I chose to go corporate. I recruited into private equity M&A in Northern California. And a huge part of my recruitment process was JLI. Not just because it demonstrated an interest in tech, but because it demonstrated skills like being able to understand new and emerging legal issues, having an interest in new technology, being able to be conversational and speak about things I may not be formally educated on, but if you can show an intellectual interest and demonstrate that you can work with clients and learn about what they do quickly, that's always impressive. And so as you move into recruiting for your summers and then this summer recruiting for 2L, JLI can be a huge component of your interviewing process, whether you're recruiting for patent or privacy or something else. Also, of course, you can do 2 journals. However, for me, I knew I was interested in JLI. I actually met Professor Yu before I came to Penn. He was part of my decision to come here. Wonderful Zoom conversation. And so I knew that if I got on JLI, that was what I wanted to do. And so because we have the early application process, I was able to skip the writing competition. If you're interested in doing more than 1 journal, of course, please do the writing competition. But JLI has some unique benefits in that while other people were blue booking, I was at a beach house. So keep that in mind. It's a possibility. If you have any questions, again, my name is Ryland. I'm the editor-in-chief for Volume 6, and I would love to talk to you.
And the last slide we'll put up will have her contact information on there for you to reach out to her. Now, in addition to the editor-in-chief, that's one thing, is a person who's been doing it for 2 years, among them probably the most, you don't do that unless you're in halfway. We also have two Ls. Who were you last year? And we went through you're partway through the experience, but we decided that in many ways you have a different perspective, speak from a different place. Let's start with Jess Lovin.
Yeah, I'll stand up.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Jessie, for those of you who I don't know. Really happy to see all of you here and that you're excited about JLI. I think to talk about my experience, through 2L and JLI, I'd talk about how passionate everyone is. And it's interesting because space law, everyone, in our group chat, we were kind of like, space law, question mark, what is that? But then because it's space law in torts, space law in international law, space law in military, space law in broadband, it was able, everyone, I feel like in our journal and in our seminar class was able to find a section of the topic that they really vibed with, and we have this thing called tangent talks and tangent papers, and so it was really cool to see everyone's passion shine in through the shared shared comment or common theme with space law. Also, like, it was really special to see the speakers. Like, we had the former GC to SpaceX, and hearing his perspectives on working with Musk were really interesting. And just an opportunity, kind of like Riley was saying, like, you don't get that opportunity in every class. Like, this is a really special thing. I also want to talk about the community building aspect. So there's, the intentional community building, which Professor Yu and Rylan talked about, but then there's also the informal community building. Like, if you're on JLI, not only do the professors, they know you and they really want to like make you in their corner, but between each other, like, there are so many people in the journal who I didn't know, but I just found out that we have certain things together. Like, for example, a bunch of us walk across the Chestnut Tree Bridge, and we were all talking about journal, and then we learned, oh, we'll all be in San Francisco this summer, and we got to talk about housing and all that. So just say that it's not just work. You can also make these connections socially and for the summer, wherever you want to make your connections. If you have any questions, I'm happy to chat as well. I can put my email on the board afterwards, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Justin. So the funny thing is, we've had this experience a couple times. Space law, on its first, some people were really interested. I actually had one student even before she matriculated saying, I want to do space law, what are the opportunities? The other thing that's fascinating to me, and I actually had no background in this. I think it's going to be important, and part of it's a way to learn something about it. But what you find is emergent areas of law like this. One of the wonderful, frustrating things is you see law changes very slowly in a lot of areas. And this is an area where they dynamically change very fast. So one of the things we talked about is new property rights regimes in space. And these are very, very much up for grabs. And the funny thing is, if people say property, boring, whatever, you read 100 old cases, actually, what we're going to recognize there, whether we're going to recognize them as property rights versus something else, or how we're going to do this, interfacing with international law, we've done environmental law, I don't remember all the things we talked about. Tort law is fabulous. When things start falling out of the sky, who's liable? I mean, this is a classic tort on some level, but it's overlaid with all these other structures. And to try to understand how this all fit together, it became really interesting. The other very non-classical one was smart contracts. And it ended up being fantastic because all the things about how it's changing the way we interact make us rethink all the stuff in contracts. My favorite little thing is, does the mailbox rule still apply when you get instant responses? And all these things we're going to have to rethink. Now, that's the most mundane part of it, but they started talking about all the different aspects, which naturally lends you into crypto, and all this other stuff and all the blockchain aspects of it and the smart contract aspects. So it's actually been it's surprisingly rich, particularly if you find an area that's changing and emerging, you've learned a lot. Anyway, our other student we have with us is Shashank Sirivolu, who is also a 2L in the journal.
Hey everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces from ITSC, so good to see you here. All right, so honestly, I echo many of the sentiments and experiences that both Rylan and Jesse have shared. Prior to coming to law school, for about a couple of years, I was a science fiction writer. So when I heard that we were, covering space law, it really felt like, it was a really sort of coincidental but also incredible experience. Jesse mentioned that we had GC from SpaceX come in. For me, it was really this experience was really part of sharing a story about what we're doing here at Penn Law when it comes to law and innovation, what my place is in that sort of overall conversation. And in many ways, during the seminar component, Professor Yu was our professor for the seminar, and it really felt like Professor Yu was really conducting an orchestra where there really are people and conversations to be had in and around the room, folks that have different perspectives about space law, whether it comes to particular areas of the law, but also when it comes to certain technologies that are on the rise, certain political conversations that are being had about the topic. So it really is sort of an active, live conversation. And I'm a storyteller, so there's a story that I like, which kind of ties to Penn, but about 300 years ago, couple miles down the street east of us, Ben Franklin started this little organization called Jinto, which would bring together people from all walks of life, cobblers, carpenters, philosophers, mathematicians, and they would talk about emerging technologies. They would talk about law and innovation. They would talk about politics concerning Philadelphia. And as a product of Jinto, there's multiple things that were really important to Philadelphia and the country. Namely, they started the first library through that organization. They started the first firehouse through that organization. And most importantly, they started the University of Pennsylvania and the Penn Hospital system. So, I like to think that maybe some of our conversations this past semester and this year resembled some of those that were had, 300 years ago, a couple miles down the street. So again, if you're interested in technology, law, innovation broadly, I highly recommend this opportunity. It's both a journal, but it's also a conversation. And in many ways, it does connect those of us who are part of the organization in sort of a bind that allows us to branch out and do many things post-law school or even during law school. So I also was part of another journal as well, so I'm going to put my email up on the board. If people are considering how to navigate two journals, I'm happy to talk about that or really anything else.
Oh, thank you. So it occurs to me as I was looking at Ryland, we actually opened up, given your interests, on a couple days on financing this stuff. And it's a real question. And among the more interesting issues which we only scratched on is almost all these companies, except for SpaceX, went bankrupt during the pandemic, because it was just a tough time. And these bankruptcies are really weird. I mean, they're very unlike any other things, and we're trying, there's a lot of great work to be done in things that even if you're not really interested in the tech, it touches on everything you have to. The thing I love about the story you just told, Shashank, is that I have read in the paper just not that long ago, is it wasn't just then. Benjamin Franklin, when he died, in his estate, left money to finance innovation initiatives in Boston and Philadelphia. And it's that money that created the Franklin Institute, which continued to churn out seed funding for entrepreneurs until about 10 years ago when they finally depleted the trust, which is you expect. And that's the fact that Benjamin Franklin was still funding innovation in the city of Philadelphia 200 years after his death is kind of mind-boggling, And if you've ever, one of the other things, just so you know, one of the things I forgot to do is this is to show you, and some of the people in this room are on these slides, and the people who are involved, and you'll recognize them. The one in the middle is from the Franklin Institute, because one of the social things were done there. They got late night access to the then Harry Potter exhibit and went and had fun, and that was one of the things they did to bond. And so to me, my own experience, my kids are now grown and in their 20s, but you couldn't pry my kids out of the Franklin Institute. So it was just such a great resource to the town in so many different ways. This is, as I promised, contact information for Ryland. For myself, Caroline Olson, who's the managing director of CTIC, who is also open for questions. There's a JLI website. This is all available here. And we'll have Jess and Shashank put their emails on the board for everyone to have. And before that, any questions?
Will the topic be finalized before the writing competition?
I'm going to try. This basically, the honest answer, this consists of me going, I am the default advisor. I will go to my colleagues, and if one of them has an idea, and some of them are going on leave, and there's all these other things, and it depends on how fast I get through everybody to find out if there's someone who wants to do it, or if not, it would default to me. If it does default to me, I have a topic in mind. And so, since I'm the default, if someone else wants to do it, I'll just kick over to next year. It's because if I make myself the first resort, I'll do it every year. And that's, actually, I'm obligated to teach certain other things for certain joint degree programs we've got going, so I can't be pinned on doing this every single year, much as I'd like to.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
So the topic is also basically super secondary to your academic growth and intellectual exploration in the seminar. I think as Professor Yu mentioned, for example, I am a corporate focused person. I wanted to explore finance related aspects of space law. And so letting him know that, he then established finance as like a subtopic within the space law overhead topic. So if you have a particular interest, if you just communicate that to like the seminar instructor, they'll find ways to make sure that you can explore that in connection with the broader topic of the seminar. So it's very choose your own adventure. Like the professors are super responsive. So think of the topic as kind of like an overarching theme, and then you'll find niches within that theme that are interesting to you.
As much as we can. You know what I mean? But it is how I like to teach. I used to be a scout leader with the Munchkins, and I actually worked with, this is my son. I'd get one student to come up with an idea for it every time. Because the thing you're deathly afraid of with kids is that no one's interested in what you're doing. And I said, there'll be at least one kid who's excited about what we're doing today. And so sort of the same thing, which is especially where you have something that you have a lot of flexibility with. And there's no mandatory curriculum where it's like, okay, if we don't cover this material, I've committed educational malpractice. It's all sort of upper level stuff, and so you very much want to adjust it to fit the interests of the students in the class. And it's a latitude you have. What else? Please.
For the application essay, are you looking more for a commentary on English, grammar, blue booking, or is it more substantive, like your take on technology law?
I would say whatever the non-helpful answer is whatever the article needs. You know, it could be that the article is brilliantly written but has conceptual problems or structural problems. And in that case, that would be the right thing to do. It could be that the ideas are fine, but it's just not conveyed in a persuasive way. The standard answer, that's the default answer, and that's not helpful. What I would say is, if I were a student doing the competition, I would probably do it all. Because you don't know exactly, this is the defensive thing that you learn to do on law school exams, on an issue spotter exam. If you don't know exactly what the professor is looking for, if you don't touch on it at all, if you touch on it and do it badly, you get an F, which is 65 points. If you omit the issue altogether, you get 0. And so if I have a choice when I'm writing a law school exam, if between breadth and depth, I always go with breadth, to make sure that I don't miss something. And I at least get some credit for every different aspect. I don't know, we haven't picked the article yet, we haven't done this yet, but if I had to guess, if that's a question in your mind where you see opportunities to do both, I would make sure to do both, all those aspects within the thing, and within the scope of the number of words.
So I know with a lot of 1Ls right now, it's really hectic with like jobs and everything. And I'd imagine that we're all on like a ton of listservs, so we're getting all these emails. And sometimes like you want to be involved in something, but you literally just miss it, or something like that. So my question is, what are among the most effective ways to get involved in the tech activities that happen at the law school? Because again, sometimes like is there a website where they're all aggregated? Is there a certain email address that maybe we should star? Just like what's your experience there?
So, JLI, my perspective is we keep a JLI listserv that does just JLI things, but our board is crossed over with the other organizations, and so unfortunately there's not like a great answer. I think ITSC is probably the closest with Tech Bites or Tech Talks, Bits and Bytes.
I write them, so.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let's tap in Jesse.
So yeah, I like the Tech Talks. So ITSC, we oftentimes will like aggregate information from the from like whoever sends it. We'll scour your website, and so if you want to sign up, I can find you and I'll get your email. But I also highly recommend the Penn and Intellectual Property Group. They also have a lot of tech law information, and their email are very, very helpful.
And the CTIC website is pretty up to date too. So anything that they're co-sponsoring, you can just take a look at that and all the events that are coming up. And
we push out a monthly newsletter. Early in it, it's supposed to be the first of every month, but I just approved it, and so it might be late this month. And we'll list all the events that are sponsored that we're involved in, but there's a research aspect if you want to know what your professors are up to. We list what they're publishing, what they're speaking in public. You know, I'm getting dragged into making all these media appearances on Gonzalez versus Google, which is a big Supreme Court case, and that choice is looming on the horizon. And it's just a matter of time. You know, I mean, this is it's amazing. It's been a while since there's been a big tech case in front of the Supreme Court. You know, it's but they're making up for it, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I agree. You know, it's just understood. Yes, so I agree. But and the honest answer is people. You know, what you'll discover as a lawyer, you can scour websites, and if you ask people what's up, they'll tell you in a minute what you could take an hour not finding out. If you want to research firms, all these, they're human resources and just being around the people, or just chatting around the journal when you're finding out what people, even finding out what's going on. It's what we lost during COVID. It's really hard to overestimate that level of connection and how that helps. Thank you. There's another hand. Yes.
Will there be an opportunity on the application to sort of communicate our interests in tech that may not be apparent in our law school activities?
Yes. Please.
So I guess this form of writing where you're responding to an article isn't something that we necessarily talk about in LPS or anything. Is there a standard that we should be following, or is it kind of just up to us?
You guys experienced it.
Oof. I mean, you guys are closer to the application period.
I think the way that I framed it is I thought about who's my audience. I mean, my audience is a respected scholar in the field, and so my tone was always very respectful, and I kind of sandwiched it. I said, "Dear Professor so-and-so, while I appreciate how you made this argument could be confusing to some, I made it very flowery language, be confusing to some readers, perhaps you might want to consider XYZ."
It's an opportunity to also sort of extend the questions that you have towards the writer, but also kind of and explaining that in a way that's also self-aware, right? I mean, not for me personally, I didn't know everything about the topic that I was reading about, and that's probably going to be the case for most people. So it's an opportunity to sort of explore some offshoots, maybe bring some other scholarship into the conversation if you can, and also pose some questions that you have to the author, to the reader.
Yeah, exactly. It is really great practice for responding to authors during the article editing process. I don't know how much you guys know about article editing, but you go through a source hunt, a first edit, and then a second edit. And so typically at the point of the first or second edit, you'll get into substantive questions about the article, of course in a very respectful manner, because the authors are academic professionals who probably have PhDs in what they're talking about. But so it's a great opportunity to kind of learn let me explore this topic. Maybe there's this tangential thing or a question that I may have. How can I broach that to this person in a respectful and sort of hedged but also curious manner? So of course, maintaining a respectful tone and also bringing in some outside research, but not too much.
Thank you.
It's styled as a memo to the author. And so, and you want those to be constructive and useful to the author, especially because you're going to publish it. I mean, so part of it can be, I think, just you're using jargon that we don't understand, or there's a background assumption we need to elaborate on. Or I think what both Shashank and Rylan are getting at, have you thought about exploring this additional dimension, which isn't in there, which would be really interesting? Or you might want to restructure it this way. I always think of this as old journalism speak. You're burying your lead, which is, the real newsworthy thing is in this huge wind-up. It's like, okay, the typical reader stopped reading about 10 pages ago. And understanding, helping them, making it impactful. As an author who publishes in journals, I think I often respond very positively to things framed in a good way, which is like, that's a really good idea. I wish I'd thought of that, because just fresh eyes, you get clue. You're sick of the stuff you're writing on by the time you get to the end, right? And you can't get enough distance from them all the time. And there are times that I've gotten great suggestions from students. I've also gotten really annoying, nitpicky stuff, which is like, all right, But presented the right way. Well, think about your writers. Think about how you would want them to engage with your writing in a way about something you really knew about. And our articles are like our children. They are who we are as scholars. And so it's something very personal to us. And so you approach it that way. And I think that approached the right way, that it's very well received. And the good news is it actually is what you'll be doing on the journal. As close as we can get. There's another hand. Anywhere? All right. with that, Shashank and Jess will put their emails on their email addresses on the board. These are here. This will be posted, so you can suggest to other people who couldn't make it. Please encourage them to attend, to look at this online. And if you have further questions, please let us know. We'd be delighted to keep this conversation going. All right. And eat.